Hi, thank you very much for joining our session today. I'm Nadia Jeffrie, and I'm going to be sharing with you the key findings from our 2023 Mobile Gender Gap Report. So the Mobile Gender Gap Report series is an annual report that we've been publishing for the last 6 years, enabling us to comment on the trends in the gender gap across low and middle income countries, or LMICs. The findings of our latest report and previous reports are drawn primarily from the GSMA Consumer Survey and are supplemented by other third-party data. This nationally representative survey has been conducted face-to-face each year since 2017, with the most recent survey covering 12 low and middle-income countries at the end of 2022. It's gathered critical data on the mobile gender gap and allows us to continue monitoring the impact of the ongoing economic crisis and other crises on women's access to and use of mobile. In this presentation, I'm going to share some of the key findings with you. Our latest data shows that while more women are using mobile internet than ever before, their rate of adoption has slowed for the second year in a row. This is shown here on the graph by the red portion of each bar, which represents the number of additional women who adopted mobile internet that year. And as you can see, it's been getting smaller since 2020. Some further worrying findings from our latest survey is that men's rate of adoption has now also slowed between 2021 and 2022. These decreased adoption rates among women and now also men highlight that progress towards digital inclusion is slowing for all in LMICs. If we take a look at what this means in terms of the mobile internet gender gap, we see that it had been consistently reducing from 2017 when it was 25%. What this means is women were 25% less likely than men to use mobile internet. And this gender gap percentage dropped every year through to 2020, where it was as low as 15%. This was, of course, good news. However, our latest estimates for 2021 and 2022 show that this progress has stalled for 2 years in a row, with the gender gap in mobile internet use now at 19%. And this is as a result of the slowing adoption rates we saw among both men and women. This gender gap is substantial and it is stubborn. So that previous slide showed us that it's clear that more is needed to close the mobile internet gender gap. In fact, in order to close this gap by 2030, we currently estimate 810 million women need to adopt it by then. This is equivalent to an average of 100 million women each year. So these grey bars represent men and women who were already using mobile internet in 2022. If the mobile internet gender gap remains unchanged, forecasts suggest that more men than women will adopt it by 2030, shown by these solid red bars as you can see, and a significant gender gap will still exist. To close the gap by 2030, more than double the number of women currently forecasted to adopt it by then must do so, shown by the shaded portion. So to circle back, based on this forecast, a total of 810 million women would be needing to adopt mobile internet by 2030 to close the gap, equivalent to 100 million women on average each year. So where should we focus our efforts? Let's look at where the gender gaps are biggest. Gender gaps vary widely by region and by country, and of the 900 million women across low and middle income countries who do not use mobile internet, almost 2/3 live in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. These also happen to be the regions with the two largest gender gaps at 41% and 36% respectively. By comparison, the mobile internet gender gap can be as low as 2% in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, if we want to close these gaps, we need to understand what's preventing women from owning a phone all the way through to using mobile internet regularly and accessing its full potential. And we use a simple framework to understand this, which is the mobile internet user journey. Gender gaps tend to widen at each stage of this journey. So the gender gap for mobile ownership across low and middle income countries is 7%, where it continues to remain largely flat, highlighting that those who still don't have a mobile phone are proving difficult to reach. It is, of course, important as well to look at what type of handset people own, as smartphone owners are typically more likely to use mobile internet. Women still own more basic handsets than men and are 17% less likely than men to own a smartphone, a gender gap that's also stalled for the second year in a row. Moving now to awareness of mobile internet. Whilst women are less likely than men to be aware of it, awareness levels are relatively high, with over 80% of men and women aware of it in 9 of the 12 survey countries. However, mobile internet awareness doesn't always translate to adoption, and there are many people, but particularly women, who are mobile users and are aware of mobile internet but do not use it, suggesting other barriers are preventing them from doing so. And as we've seen, the mobile internet gender gap is still high at 19%. Of course, beyond mobile internet adoption, it's also important to compare how regularly women and men are using it and whether it's meeting their life needs to the same extent. Despite the persistent mobile internet gender gap in most survey countries, once men and women become mobile internet users, the vast majority do tend to use it every day. But most of these users, especially women, only do so for a limited range of purposes. We cannot forget to address this gender gap in mobile use, especially given this year we found that women who were already using mobile internet were more likely than men to report having reduced their use of it in the past year. And these women were more likely to be rural and less educated, highlighting how the current economic crisis has impacted those who tend to be more disadvantaged already. Now, if we look specifically at the top reported barriers to mobile ownership and mobile internet use, across survey countries, the top barriers that men and women said were preventing them from owning a phone are still very similar, with little change since 2019. These barriers are affordability, specifically of handsets, literacy and digital skills, and the perceived relevance of mobile. However, there are variations at the top reported barriers at the country level. Across our countries, our research found that once women are using a mobile phone and are aware of mobile internet, the top barriers preventing them from adopting it are affordability, primarily of internet-enabled handsets, a lack of literacy and skills, and then safety and security concerns. These overall rankings also have not changed, despite the global economic crisis that began in 2022. You'll notice that also these same barriers will appear for men. However, millions more women than men face these barriers because so many more are offline or they don't own a phone. We also see that these barriers disproportionately impact women, as women tend to belong to the groups that are most likely to be unconnected, such as those who are unemployed or have low literacy levels and are often affected by social norms, which make mobile ownership and use more difficult. While addressing these barriers is a challenge, the potential socioeconomic benefits of doing so are substantial. Firstly, the commercial opportunity for closing the mobile gender gap is significant. We estimate that closing the gender gap in mobile ownership and use across low and middle income countries presents a $230 billion opportunity for the mobile industry. And at least 85% of this estimated opportunity is derived from closing the gender gap in mobile use alone. Closing the mobile gender gap will also have a positive social impact on women users. In fact, across our survey countries, most women and men who use mobile internet reported it had a positive impact on their lives and that they use it every day. Closing the mobile gender gap will also benefit society and economies more broadly and contribute to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, including those related to education, health, poverty reduction, and of course, gender equality. So, what can stakeholders do to address the mobile gender gap? Our full report provides more specific recommendations for different stakeholders to consider, but here are 4 high-level actions we'd like you to take away. Firstly, ensure that there is a focus on gender equality and reaching women at an organizational and policy level through senior leaders championing the issue and setting gender-specific equity targets. An example of this is our Connected Women Commitment Partner Initiative, where more than 40 operators set targets to increase their female customer base and have already successfully reached over 65 million additional women since 2016. Gender disaggregated data is also crucial. It's crucial for measuring the gender gap and informing investments and action to address it. While our survey does fill important data gaps, much more is needed to understand women's mobile use, their needs, the barriers they face, especially in the different contexts and among specific groups. This could include further research and data to understand why women were more likely than men to report reducing their use of mobile internet in 2022. And when it comes to designing, implementing mobile-related products, services, policies, and initiatives, stakeholders should ensure that women's needs, circumstances, and challenges are explicitly addressed. And this includes addressing the key barriers faced by women, as well as consideration of the social norms that can contribute to them experiencing those barriers more acutely than men. A couple of examples when it comes to the top 2 barriers mentioned earlier. Affordability. This could be improved by policies and initiatives that lower the upfront cost of mobile handsets, particularly internet-enabled handsets, which would disproportionately benefit women. For example, lowering mobile-specific taxes and handset financing initiatives. Literacy and digital skills. Mobile operators, the development community, and others could invest in mobile digital skills training that purposefully target women as well as men to increase their digital literacy and confidence levels. And then finally, collaborate and partner with different stakeholders to address the mobile gender gap, as the barriers that women face, they are complex and they are interrelated. Targeted intervention is needed from industry, policymakers, the development community, and other stakeholders to ensure that women are no longer left behind. This year's data is a clear call to action to do more to ensure that women are not further excluded from an increasingly digital society. With informed, targeted action, we can tackle these existing mobile gender gaps. If you want to know more, you can read the full report, which is out today, and you can see the details on this slide. Thank you for listening.